Welcome to my madness, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are going to be taking a look at what, in my opinion, is the top 10 worst Marvel Legends of 2024. Now, I do have to just say something here, and that is that, honestly, Marvel Legends has had a pretty good year. They've come out with a lot of great figures this year, and I've been very happy with most of the stuff that has come out. And so maybe you can think of this as more of a top 10 most disappointing figures than just downright bad or horrible figures. Not every figure on this list is a bad figure. Maybe it's just not where it should be. So, with Marvel Legends doing a pretty damn good job, I mean, it's kind of hard to really trash them too bad, but this wouldn't be YouTube if we didn't give some companies some shit about some products once in a while. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right in. In at number 10, we have the kind of re-release of the movie Deadpool. Now, there were some upgrades on this figure from the previous version, namely the fact that you could actually take his guns out of his holsters, but this figure was never really great. It's always been too small for a movie Deadpool. He's pretty much smaller than almost every other Marvel Legend that's come out here in the last several years. It's a pretty small buck, and especially in a year where we were getting Deadpool and Wolverine, and you were going to want a good Deadpool movie figure that was going to look good and look height appropriate next to your Wolverine figure. This guy was just way too small. And I did buy this figure, if I'm perfectly honest, and I don't hate it. Again, it's more about it being disappointing than it is actually it being a horrible figure. Alright, so at number 9, we have the Iron Man Mark 20 from the new Iron Man Retro Carded Wave. Now, this wave was decent, I guess. It had some good figures, it had some bad figures. It wasn't great, it wasn't horrible, but really the only standout in the entire wave was, of course, the classic She-Hulk character, which is a fantastic figure that we all loved. But this one here, as a huge Iron Man fan, I just couldn't bring myself to go ahead and slap the money down to buy this thing. Every time I would get it in hand and look at it up close, there's just something about it that just doesn't look right. I love the sculpt, but basically what it comes down to is just the cheap, plasticky look of this figure. And I don't know what Hasbro needs to do to get over this hump. They've been on this hump for quite a while, where they take these characters that are supposed to be armored or metallic or whatever, and they use their stupid little swirly plastic instead of actually just painting a figure metallic. And it just looks awful. And in fact, when they use the shiny, swirly, metallic-y plastic, it makes it look more plasticky and more cheap. And that's what happened with this character right here. With this figure, it just looks even cheaper than it is because of the type of plastic and the color of plastic that they used on this thing, to the point that I was at Ross 3 days ago, and they had this figure for $12.99, and I thought, you know what, for $12.99, I'll finally pick it up. But in the end, I ended up putting it back. I just couldn't do it. Hands down, the figure looks cheap. All right, so in at number 8, we have Logan with Headpool, and this is just stupid. In the Deadpool and Wolverine movie, he never ever looked like this. There was one scene where he was wearing civvy clothes in the bar when we first see him, and that lasted not long at all. Plus, that outfit didn't even look like this outfit. The rest of the movie, he wore the blue and gold. And on top of that, this figure just doesn't look good at all. Like, head sculpt's great, and I like Headpool, and that's about it. Like, if you wanted to pick this figure up just for the head sculpt and to get a Headpool, then cool. But other than that, it just looks like boring old man Logan who shops at Old Navy and, I don't know, is just escorting his niece to a soccer game or something. Like, this is just a really, really boring looking figure. Now, it's not a bad figure in the sense of like articulation or sculpt or paint or anything like that. It's just a really, really bad look for freaking Logan, for Wolverine. Again, he's never worn this costume, this outfit in any movie that I know of. And he certainly didn't wear it in the movie that is right there on the package, Deadpool and Wolverine, on top of the fact of just being a ridiculously boring outfit for a very unboring character. All right, so in at number 7, we have the Iron Man Mark 9. And I'm going to be honest, guys, this is on the list for the exact same reason as the Iron Man Mark 20. It just looks cheap and plasticky. The only reason this one's up higher on the list is because of the fact that I was looking forward to this particular armor much more than I was the other one, because this, for me, is a very classic early 90s Iron Man armor that I've looked forward to getting an update on for a really, really long time. I've got the old one from more than 10 years ago at this point, and I still love that figure, except for the fact that it's pretty much true 6-inch scale, which makes it really hard to fit into a modern Marvel Legends collection because it's right at that 6-inch mark. So it almost looks like a kid in the armor next to your other figures. However, it's still got better paint and sculpt as well on that one than this new one does. And so again, same situation as the last one. I go to pick this thing up on multiple occasions, get it in my hand, even at Ross for $12.99, and I look at it, it just looks cheap and plasticky, and I just can't bring myself to pick this one up. All right, so in at number 6, we have Last Stand Spider-Man. Now, I bought this figure, and while I think there may have been some kind of beer goggles on or something, I don't know, when I first got the figure, I didn't hate the figure as much as I've come to kind of hate this figure over the last few months since I picked him up. When it really boils right down to it, it's just a horrible Spider-Man figure. Now, look, the costume itself, the Last Stand costume is a great costume, and visually, as far as the sculpt goes, I don't mind this figure. I like having a different look for Spider-Man. The issue is it's still Spider-Man, and this has absolutely abysmal articulation, especially for a Spider-Man figure, but it's got poor articulation even for a character that's not Spider-Man. It's just really, really bad across the board, and there's just really nothing that stands out or pops about this figure other than it's just a different version of Spider-Man, which I guess is enough for some people, and honestly I thought would be enough for me when I first picked him up. But as time has gone on, I've realized just how bad this figure actually is. All right, so in at number 5, we have Superior Iron Man. And this all boils down to one thing, and that is that he's the wrong color. Superior Iron Man was supposed to be silver, not white. And yes, it was a light silver in the comics, but he was still supposed to be silver, not stark white. On top of that, the sculpt itself is nothing amazing on this. The head sculpt is probably the best thing about this. Obviously, we're talking about the unmasked Tony Stark head sculpt. It is a good head sculpt, but that's really the only good thing about this at all. And when it comes to this particular figure, even though he's not one of my favorite versions of Iron Man in the suit, it certainly was one that a lot of people were looking forward to, including myself, to being able to add to their shelf. But when you really take a look at it, whether it's the color or the more boring sculpt that isn't even accurate to the comics, it just is a real dud pretty much across the board. And again, this falls into what I was talking about earlier, but just being a really disappointing figure in that this could have been one of the best figures of the year had it been done right, because a lot of people were really looking forward to the Superior Iron Man armor. All right, so in at number 4, we have unmasked, uncostumed Spider-Punk, to which I say, why? Like, okay, like we already got a Spider-Punk figure from the last wave of this, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and it was actually a pretty good figure. I liked that one a lot. This one just really doesn't have a point of existing, in my opinion. Never mind the fact that for some reason he's basically purple-esque. He's just got a weird color to the figure that really kind of washes out everything. There's no pop to this figure. There's nothing that stands out. Great head sculpt. The jacket looks good, and it is very evocative as far as the sculpt goes for the art style of the movie, but it's just a really bland, boring figure that doesn't really stand out and certainly doesn't evoke the sense of the movie, except for maybe a couple of scenes where he was in a shadow, so he was all kind of monochrome or one color or whatever. I don't know, man. This figure really should have popped, much like the first Spider-Punk figure did. I don't know why they went this direction with this version of the character and then made it this kind of almost one solid color version that was just going to make a boring version of a character even more boring. All right, so in at number 3, we have X-Men 97 animated Jean Grey. And this was just a big disappointment, I think, for a lot of people. This is just a bad figure across the board. I mean, the articulation's absolutely horrible, up to and including the fact that there's absolutely no torso articulation whatsoever. The costume's been changed. Yes, I know it was changed for X-Men 97, but it looks much worse. And on this figure, it looks even worse than it does in the animated show. She just is very boring, and let's be honest here, she's supposed to be a full-grown, voluptuous woman, and that is certainly not what this figure evokes when it comes to this character. Now, I will say both the head sculpts are actually really good. They're solid, and so if you wanted to pick this up on like clearance or something and use these head sculpts on another figure just to kind of make a better version of Jean Grey, that would work great because Hasbro did a really good job on the head sculpts, but that's really it. Other than that, the figure itself is a huge disappointment and just really kind of sucks. All right, so in at number 2, we have what for me is one of the biggest disappointments of the year, and that is the Peter Parker / Spider-Man from Into the Spider-Verse, the original version of Spider-Man in Miles Morales' universe. I have the Sentinel figure of this character, and it's great, and I was really looking forward to seeing what Marvel Legends would do with that same character, you know, basically just giving us a blonde Spider-Man Peter Parker. And this is what we got. And to be honest, it's a horrible figure. The articulation absolutely sucks pretty much across the board. There's nothing spectacular about this figure that stands out or pops or really anything. The head sculpt's pretty bland. There's not even any detailing done on the suit itself in the webbing or anything like that. And again, go back to the articulation with horrible articulation, even for a regular Marvel Legends figure, much less a Spider-Man figure. There's just nothing about this figure that's good, and it's all disappointing, especially for a big Spider-Man fan like myself. And in at number 1, we have the re-release of the Spider-Man Far From Home upgraded suit. Look, this figure was ass the first time it came out. I don't know what possessed Hasbro to re-release this steaming turd, to be honest. This is not a good figure. Dude, you can pick this figure up, the original version, on clearance for like $5, man. You can find them all over eBay, cheap as hell, because nobody wanted this figure, okay? Nobody cares about this This is by far the worst of all the like Spider-Man MCU figures that exist from all 3 of those movies, and even the ones that came out for some of the Avengers movies. Like, out of all the Spider-Mans, live action MCU Spider-Man figures that have come out, this one's absolutely the worst one. It's boring. There's no detailing on the webs. The articulation sucks. It's just an ass of a figure. And the fact that they decided to re-release what is not even like debatably, but like just without a doubt known as the worst of those figures, to re-release this one like people didn't get a chance to get it the first time. No. We got a chance to get it the first time. We just didn't want it, right? Like, that's why it ended up at Ollie's in mass back in the day. Like, this was a horrible decision by Hasbro, and absolutely by far the worst figure they released this year. All right, so there you have it. There is my top 10 worst Marvel Legends of 2024. And, you know, you had 4 different Spider-Man characters on that list. You had 3 different Iron Man characters on that list, and then a handful of others. You know, and look, I mean, you probably love at least one of these figures yourself, chances are, if you're watching this video. And I don't mean to knock anybody that picks up any of these or even all of these figures. Certainly, there's about 3 of them on this list that I actually own, that I went out and spent my hard-earned money on. Okay, so I'm not judging anybody for liking these figures, but I think we can arguably say in a year that Hasbro did a really good job, in my opinion, and put out a lot of solid figures, that these are probably the worst ones that were released this year, even if you might like some of these figures. And that's really what it comes down to. Like I said at the beginning, maybe this should have been more of a most disappointing figures, because that's certainly what most of them were for me. These were characters that I was looking forward to, at least some of them, and the figure came out and it was just absolutely disappointing. So maybe they're not the worst of the worst, and there's certainly a lot of these figures that are better than some of the worst ones of previous years, but if we're judging just by 2024, this has to be my top 10. But hey guys, I would love to hear what you guys think. Let me know in the comment section down below if you actually do like any of these figures, or let me know in the comment section down below what your worst figures, at least from Marvel Legends of 2024, are. So that is it, guys. Thank you for watching, and always remember to enjoy your collection.